Okay, I welcome you to the Dupe Ajayi show, a program where we do a reflection on the media, the way it was in the past, the way it is now, and the practice tomorrow we'll take a look at. Today I'm bringing you another boss of mine. This boss of mine used to be editor of New Nigerian Newspaper, and then he became the co-founder of a Kaduna-based defunct magazine, the Citizen magazine. And then after which he became the press secretary to the former head of state, General Abdulsalam Abubakar. Of course, thereafter he was writing columns, syndicating for different newspapers, trusts, and some other online papers. But 9 years ago, he was appointed as INEC National Commissioner. And this is the office we are in now, in his 9th year. I give you Mallam Mohammed Haruna.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Welcome to the program. I'm glad to see you after so many years. Mallam, we just want to know, you did become an editor the same day, of course, when you started. How did you get into journalism?
Well, from the word go, I was fascinated by the written word from my primary school days. Let's go back to when I was born. I was born in 1951, so I over 74 years ago in Ibadan. But I didn't grow up there. The younger sister to my grandfather was one that brought us up, myself and a cousin of mine, who ended up being in the army and retired as a major general. So that's Soweto, and she was married in Kano, so that's where I grew up, in Sabongeri in Kano. And as I said, I was always fascinated by the written word. We lived on the streets called Niger Road in Sabongeri, just 2 streets in Kano. There was a newspaper, one of the newspapers in Zig's group, the Comment.
Okay.
It was being printed on the university. And I used to just go there to see, and at that time, that is when we were in primary school, I used to read it a lot. There was one particular column that I fascinated with, they called it Tidbit by Arabic. It's like a kind of Tidbits by Arabic. Tidbits. But Arabic in Hausa means thunder. I don't know why they chose that name. Maybe so as I said, I was fascinated. And then from my primary school days, I went to the secondary school in my hometown. And I come from Gida, which is in Nigeria State. Okay. So I was in government college, and then I took interest. I was in the press club. At the point in time, I was editing, deputy editor for the school's magazine and so on. And then, of course, after my secondary school, went to ABU. I read political science. At that time, there was no mass communication. I read political science. But even as a university undergraduate, I used to do part-time job with the New Nigerian. It was the newspaper, one of the best newspapers at that time. So we used to do vacation, and then of course, after graduation, I did my youth corps in a Catholic school in the East. At that time, when we were to start NYSC, the region was East Central.
Yes.
Just on the eve of that, shortly after Murtala, before his his assassination, the East Central was split into Anambra and I fell on to the Anambra side. As soon as I finished my youth corps, it was like almost automatic. I joined the New Nigerian full-time staff. And of course, all my life, that was
spent in Nigeria.
From New Nigeria, as a correspondent, then one of the highlights of that period was when I was the correspondent of the paper covering the Constituent Assembly. Remember the Constituent Assembly that Obasanjo set up, which ushered in Lagos.
Satellite house.
But the sittings was in the old House of Reps.
Yes. In Victoria.
No, not Victoria. Yeah, no, in Kenya. I think the House of Reps was in Kenya. It was in Lagos Island.
Yes.
The House of Reps was in Lagos, like,
yes.
not far.
Yes.
So that's where the Constituent Assembly sat. It was, I think the chair was Justice Udo. You know, of course, ahead of that, I ran a series of interviews with the key actors in that Constituent Assembly. Adamu Churuma, Shola Saraki, Sisi Olo. I went around the entire country interviewing people on how, they think the Constituent Assembly will come. So, of course, after that, eventually acted as an editor. For about 11 months. I wasn't confirmed. At that point, at the point of confirmation, Dana Bessel, who is so rest in peace, who died just recently, he was brought in as the editor and I was appointed his deputy editor. So we worked hand in glove with him and, eventually he left, as you know, to co-found Newswatch. But I remained back in New Nigeria until eventually I became its managing director between 1985 and 1988. Of New Nigeria.
When you got that appointment to New Nigeria, you started from the Kaduna office, right?
Kaduna, that's the headquarters.
Yes.
At that time, it was the only newspaper that was publishing two locations. Yeah. We had the Lagos office,
at Ijora,
and then of course the head office.
So you started in Kaduna at the head office?
Kaduna, even my vacation jobs we used to do in Kaduna. But then when I covered the Constituent Assembly, I moved to Lagos. So I was covering it from my Lagos office.
How was, when you were appointed as a reporter, how was the first day in the newsroom? How did you feel the first day you went to
Well, of course I was excited. I mean, it's something I've always loved to do. The editor at that time, by sheer coincidence, we happened to come from the same town. Not only from
the editor of the paper.
Of the paper
at
that time, Mallam Mohammed.
Okay.
The first indigenous editor of the paper was Mallam Mohammed Haruna. The first editor was, of course, an expatriate, Sharp. Then he was succeeded by Mallam. So there was a succession plan. After Mallam Haruna became the editor. After Mallam Haruna, Mallam Truly. So at the time I joined, Truly was the editor of the newspaper. And it was only one publication. That was the New Nigerian. We had no Sunday. It wasn't a staple as such. Well, there was a second newspaper, but it was the Hausa,
yes,
which is even much older than New Nigerian.
What's the name of the other stable?
Much older than even New Nigerian.
That started before
the New colonial times that Gaskia was published by the colonial authorities in Zaria, not even in Kaduna.
What does Gaskia mean?
Gaskia means truth. So the title of the newspaper was Gaskia Tafuko. Literally meaning truth has more value than a penny. Wow. So that is truth is better than money.
Truth is better than money. So how long were you a reporter for before you climbed that plan and became
I was a reporter from 1976 because my youth corps was 75. Ended in 70. So I joined 76. I was a reporter from 76 until 81. It was in 1981. There was a small crisis. The editor, the substantive editor,
was the crisis? Do you
want to I don't know. The editor at that time, this was from Bauchi, Mallam Ibrahim Suleiman.
Okay.
Now, the former governor of Northwest State, Usman Farouk, he is from Gombe. And the Bauchi State comprised at that time of Bauchi province and Gombe province. Now, he was campaigning for the creation of Gombe State.
Oh.
That was the former governor. He was governor of Northwest. Northwest State at that time comprised Sokoto, Niger, Zamfara now, and all those states. But essentially at that time, two provinces, Niger province and Sokoto province. Okay. Sokoto at that time, that's what was eventually broken into Zamfara, Kenya and Sokoto. So he was the governor. So when he retired as a governor, I guess he wanted to go to the state for him. So he came to our premises. I don't know what happened, but there was a kind of altercation between himself and Mallam Ibrahim. As I said, Mallam Ibrahim is from Bauchi. he was overloaded. Maybe there was something he wanted Mallam Ibrahim to do, and he didn't do, and then they had their falling out. I don't know why eventually Mallam Ibrahim was suspended. At that time, I was the most senior staff, so I was appointed to act as an editor. While he was moved, he was suspended. Eventually, he didn't come back.
He did not return.
He was not returned to edit the newspaper. I think he was sent to marketing department. I don't remember now, but he never came back to edit the paper.
So how was it as editor? How was your experience?
New Nigeria was. I'm sure you will agree with me. It was probably the most literate newspaper at that time. It had this one each column, that everybody.
Yes.
Its stories, the editors were very, very meticulous, very rigorous. Check, and this was the diet upon which we were brought up. You check and cross-check and cross-check, and then of course the English itself. I remember in those days, the other rival newspapers like Tribune and so on, they used to say our editorials were faxing from abroad. Because they couldn't understand how somebody from this part of the world could write such good editorials. So it was really exciting.
You had a column, New Nigeria had a column, Candido. Yes, I still remember. I used to read Candido.
Yeah,
everybody. And it was as if whatever Candido wrote was what the government would do.
I don't know about that.
Yes, we had a general feeling that Candido was a pulse of the government at that time, because most things you read in Candido invariably would be the decision of the government, and the Candido never had a face to it.
No, it was really New Nigeria had a policy. I think it was operating almost like on the policy of the economists, which for me is probably the best. They call themselves newspaper. I don't know why, the London Economist, but it's a magazine. It's anonymous. It's only when they do pull-outs that they will have an offer. But all articles, the editorials, and so on and so forth, you don't see bylines. So, of course, New Nigeria as a newspaper, you will give byline if the reporter deserves it. Or columns, and then, of course, articles, but there were no columns in the sense in which we came to know it,
pictures and everything.
Everything was, and Candido was the epitome of that anonymity.
Yes,
but we all contributed. But
so it wasn't written by only one
person. But the style was consistent because, at the end of the day, the editor at that time, of course, Mallam Haruna, who eventually became the MD, everything had to fit in. But when you send in materials, then it will be edited to fit into the style of Candido.
Like it will be rewritten into a particular form that is your own house.
The information came from everywhere, the materials came from everywhere. Myself, Mallam Mohammed, may he so rest in peace. You remember he was also the co-founder of Newswatch. We all joined, myself and himself, joined New Nigeria the same day. He of course, he had the advantage of having a red mascot. A red mascot was really like me, and I said, I read political science from Mallam University. And he did his own youth corps with the New Nigeria.
Oh,
he served
right there.
He served there in Kaduna. Of course, when he was in Unilab, he used to write stories. He used to even break stories for New Nigeria, even as a student in the university. So it was natural that when he graduated, he too joined New Nigeria. But eventually, of course, I'm sure you know his story. He left to join Concord first, before eventually he left Concord
and joined his friends in Newswatch.
He actually Newswatch was his idea. But typical of Yakubu, being a self-effacing person, as soon as he started, he decided to go to the background, took a back seat and let the others, because of course they were a senior.
Newswatch was his idea.
It was his idea. It has always been his idea for a long time, even when he joined Concord. Then when they started having issues with the publisher, Abiola, now persuaded Ray and Delegiwa for them to start.
And Dan addressing.
Dan at that time, he was my boss. He was the editor of New Nigeria, but he was beginning to have some problems also. So he decided to.
So he joined them. He wasn't in the Concord with them.
No, he was never in the country. He was, at the time he joined them, he was editor of New Nigeria.
So how long were you editor for before?
Just 11 months. As I said, I wasn't confirmed. There were some issues and so on. I had issues. At that time, the new...
You were never confirmed as editor.
I was never confirmed as
editor. We
editor.
knew you as editor of Nigeria. Okay, so.
I acted as for 11 months. But under normal circumstances, you shouldn't act more than 6 months. You are either confirmed or you are not, or you go. Now, I wasn't confirmed, but like I said, Dan was brought in. At that time, Dan was, of course, my family, senior, age-wise, and even in the profession. He had edited Standard. He was in Benue at that time.
He was more experienced.
Far more experienced than I was. Actually, he had even worked in New Nigeria because he started his career in journalism in New Nigeria before he even went to Unilag. You know, himself and Rebo, they were classmates in Unilag. But before, so he went there more or less as an adult student. He had started work. He was from Teachers College. You know, he joined ABU as a librarian. Then Mallam Haruna, he used to go headhunting. He could see some potential in it, so he plucked him from ABU as a librarian, and he worked in New Nigeria. It was as when he was working in New Nigeria that he eventually went to Unilag to study mass comm. So of course, after this is tour, that time Benue was along with Plateau, they were one state. Yeah, so he edited, I think he edited Standard before eventually when Benue was created, he moved back to edit. At the time he was brought to edit New Nigeria, he was I think he was a very senior civil servant. I think he was even acting as the secretary to the state, to the state government.
So after being acting editor?
Then after acting, as I said, I wasn't confirmed, but I remained in editorial. Then around 1973, there was a crisis of sorts. You know, MPN had become, you know, MPN was the governor at that time under Shagari. And at about that time, I got admission to read mass comm in Columbia University, which is, you know, a postgraduate degree in Columbia. But because of that crisis, I was removed from the editorial department altogether and sent to marketing. I had no issues. That didn't bother me much. My greater concern at that time was to be able to go and do my master's.
That's what you wanted.
That was what I wanted. And the newspaper that I accepted actually initially to sponsor it. But because of this crisis that we had with the authorities, that is the LPN or the Shagaris of media, they said they were not going to sponsor the course anymore. And if I insisted on going, I had to resign. But eventually they relented on that. They allowed me to go, but that I was going to sponsor myself. But fortunately, I was able to get sponsorship. So I still was able to go. That is, I remained a staff.
So
I was able to go finish my master's. When I finished the master's, I came back. And then this time around, went back to the editorial department. So it was while, during that period, there was a, you know, Buhari school against Shagari, then Babangida school against Buhari. It was Babangida that appointed me the managing director of the paper.
Okay, before you became the managing director, just before you went for your master's, you said there was some crisis with government in the newspaper. The New Nigeria was perceived as a government newspaper. What would you and how would you have crisis with the same government?
Well, no, I don't, you know, that is one of the paradoxes of New Nigeria. It was government owned.
Yeah, it was
but it was the most outspoken newspaper in the country at that time. It was critical of even the government that owned it. Then, of course, when the states were created, you know, 6 states first.
Now.
So all the states jointly owned the newspaper.
Yes.
So, you know, that kind of joint ownership, it has its own...
That will lead to some problems. I know, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand
but still, the New Nigeria continued to be as much as possible as independent as it was. In fact, one of the things that brought the problem was there was an editorial we wrote, you know, which kind of raised issues about some I think Niger State government. At that time, the current emir of Suleja, Alhaji Awal Ibrahim, he was the governor of Niger State. And there were issues about, during Buhari, there were issues about the currency, some issues. So New Nigeria wrote about the story and said the governor needed to come clear, come clean with the people. They should tell people what exactly were the problem. I don't remember the details of that editorial. I personally, I wasn't the one, I was acting as the editor, but I wasn't the one that wrote it, the editorial. As you know very well, once the editorial is discussed in an editorial meeting,
it becomes the editorial of the paper.
But somebody is assigned to write it.
Yeah, I know.
So a colleague of mine, Clement, was actually the person that drafted that made the original draft. But being the editor, of course, and the final word, we edited to fit the style of New Nigeria. And of course, I accepted responsibility for that. So because of that, that was what the source of the crisis. They said they were being critical of government, that one of the owners of the newspaper itself, because those 6 states owned the New Nigeria at that time.
New Nigeria was set up by government, was funded by government. So where did you get the audacity to be that independent? How? How were you able to assert your independence?
I think this question should be put to the original editors. Mallam Haruna is named. I wasn't.
They're not here.
At the time, first I think it's Mallam.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, the first MD was an expatriate, Charles Chow.
Mm-hmm.
New Nigeria actually goes back even to colonial times, because before independence, the North used to publish a newspaper called, it was published in Kano. The name has escaped me now. It was, because New Nigeria derived its name even from that paper.
Okay. I will have to find out the name of the paper.
Yeah. So
this was before New Nigeria.
Before New Nigeria, it used to be published in Kano. In Zaria, along with Gaskia Tafikobo, Nigerian Citizen. That was the name.
Okay.
Nigeria, just like Sketch was published by in the West, as a government newspaper, as opposed to Tribune, which was private. It was Nigerian Citizen. So the first edition of New Nigeria actually was New Nigerian Citizen. It was eventually that Citizen.
Nigerian Citizen. So
the Citizen was removed, so it was left as
so from Nigerian Citizen, they added new.
They added
it's a new
New
paper.
Nigerian Citizen, and then removed the Citizen and just became New Nigeria. Because the Citizen is implied in the New Nigeria. So Adam Chiruma, as the first indigenous editor, actually he was one of those what you might consider radicals. He served, he was an officer in the Premier's office. So he came into journalism from the civil service background. But because they were all contemporaries, they had inside information about everything, things that were going on in government. So I think because they had this solid peer relationship, it wasn't as if they were subordinate to anybody. They could look a governor in the eye and tell him. In fact, he probably was even older than some of the governors at that time. So, given his courage, given, of course, and then his background, I think he read history. So, in short, he's laid a very solid foundation for New Nigeria, and this was now inherited. So, those who succeeded him at Mallam Haruna, the same, likewise, truly. And down the line, then there was Tukur Uthman, then there was one other MD before me. So, but that solid foundation that was laid by at least the first 3 of them, that is Mallam Haruna, was what made New Nigeria to, even though it was owned by government, to be able to speak the truth.
You did not have skirmishes, you did not have people being arrested as you do some other newspaper.
I think there was an arrest. I think Mallam Haruna was arrested, but it was, I think, brief.
Yeah,
because Mallam, I think he's the only one I can remember that was arrested.
So then,
and this was during Gowon's time.
After Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
After being the acting editor, you were editing the paper anyway. After
Mm.
your editorship, then you became the managing director.
I became the. That's when I told you what happened in between. I went for my master's, came back,
When you returned.
back to the editorial department instead of the
what?
marketing,
Okay.
which I had to like
Okay.
So it was in that position.
So
That-
between your editorship of the New Nigeria itself, you had other various experiences. You were in marketing, then you went abroad to study.
Yeah,
Okay, and then you came back to the editorial.
back to the editorial
Before you were
department.
now moved as managing director.
Before eventually
How long were you managing director for?
for about 4 years, 1985 to 1989.
How was the experience?
Of course, exciting.
Beautiful. No issues, no nothing. New Nigeria was doing well on the market.
Yeah, we were
Yes,
doing
I
well
would
on
like
the
to
market.
know.
But of course, there were also, remember this was under a military government.
Yes, I
This is another paradox. New Nigeria seems to have enjoyed more freedom when it was under military than when it was under
How was that? How was that?
It's because it was really sharp at this time that all these crises that I told you about started. Because they wanted to have far more control.
The politicians.
The politicians. The soldiers, ironically, were not breathing down our neck like the politicians did.
Incidentally, one would have thought the military regime
Yeah.
had more cash. So you were managing director for about 4 years. So what happened after 4 years?
Again,
you
the
stopped
same
managing?
director that appointed me sacked me.
What did you do?
I don't know.
You were appointed managing director
Yeah,
of New
that's
Nigeria
right.
by the military president,
Yeah.
Ibrahim Babangida, and he also sacked you.
He sacked me.
Did you ever get to know what you did?
Well, I don't know exactly what I did, but eventually I got to find out, to begin with, he was under pressure not to even appoint me as MD, to begin to sack me.
Okay.
So he did. A number of occasions we used to write some editorials which the government was not quite comfortable with. I remember at least quite a number of them. One particular I always remember was an editorial. I think Margaret Thatcher was visiting.
Okay.
And we wrote an editorial which was somewhat critical of
The government?
of
British government.
of the visit.
Of the
Which the
visit.
government, of course, was not too happy about, because, of course, naturally, the visitor would think, since it's a government-owned, that's awkward for a government-owned newspaper to be
To criticize the visit.
critical of a visit that, So, quite a few other things that there will be some stories that we're not happy about, but nobody ever said, I mean, I was never really, would I say, punished for that, or I don't know if they want to use, So, but I think cumulatively, eventually,
And it's
got to-
together.
and of course, I don't know if you remember when the Suki became the Sultan of Sokoto.
Mm-hmm.
There were crises, they wrote an editorial, there were insinuations that it was thanks to him, that to Babangida, because he wasn't the choice of the kingmakers and so on and so on. And we wrote an editorial to say the Suki should, now that she is the Sultan, he's the father of everybody. So even those that contested against him, he's their father, so he should bring everybody so that I eventually learned that some people in authority were not too happy about that. But it took its time because
About your editorial
about the
or about
editorial.
disappointment.
No, about our editorial, because our editorial was saying, you should bring
Trying
everybody
to
on
manifest. Yeah, it was already Sultan anyway.
He was already Sultan and so on, but there are some people, because of course, as was well known at that time, he wasn't the kingmaker's choice. But he probably was, in terms of qualification, he was
The most experienced,
he was retired as a PAMSEC and all that. And he was very active in Jamaat al-Nasr al-Islam, which was the umbrella organization of Muslim organizations.
And Emma was removed.
Yeah?
And Emma was removed for him.
No.
For the secret. What happened?
No,
How did he get
the Sultan died. The Sultan at that time is the father of the current Sultan.
Okay.
He died.
So it was after the
So
death
it
of
was
the
after the death of the Sultan Abubakar, who served during Gawon time right through to the time I think he died. I think it was during August. I don't remember now when he died. But he was one of the longest serving emirs in the north.
Okay.
Sultan Abubakar, very wise, very genial person. So after he died, of course, the thing became vacant, and of course, naturally, all the princesses that wanted to contest. The Sultan was one of them. She was also nominated quite a number of them. The father of the current Sultan, so Sultan Abubakar is his grandfather, not the father. The father of the current Sultan was also among those who contested
at that time.
Machuku.
Okay, Machuku, yes.
So, but they all lost out to the Sultan, who, of course, because he had his connections and so on and all that. So I came to learn that maybe that's one of the things that was, let's say, the straw that broke the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Otherwise, even for a long time, people can, when we write some editorial, they were not, but you know, Babangida is very light-hearted. So for almost 4 years, he tolerated me.
Really tolerated you. So after being removed, how did you take your removal to start with?
Oh, of course, it's tried. I mean, I became MD at 34. So I was still, I mean, the 8 years was when I was still young. So I know that I had already made up my mind that even after leaving New Nigeria, I was going to remain in the profession. For me, as I told you, for me, The Economist is the best magazine in the world.
And what
for the I think that was the kind of format. As a matter of fact, so when we left, of course, then I decided to start Citizen, and we co-founded it.
To ask you, how did the Citizen start?
We were inspired again by Newswatch, because Newswatch will probably be the first newspaper magazine that was owned by the journalists themselves, at least mostly owned. Of course, they had invited others.
Briefly, there was this week. There was a paper this week, the magazine.
No.
No.
This came after Newswatch.
Oh, okay, Newswatch was the first.
Newswatch, the first weekly news magazine. Of course, before Newswatch, there was Chris Okoli's
New Breed.
But New Breed was a monthly.
New Breed, yes, okay.
New Breed was
not weekly.
New Breed was a monthly.
The
first weekly was Newswatch.
Okay.
And it was co-owned by the four of them. Of course, there were other. So that was our model, So myself, Kabir Yusuf, who is now the publisher of Trust, Adamu, who served as the Minister of Education for Buhari, Ajayi Bilkisu, she was the first woman editor of New Nigeria.
Oh, she actually edited New Nigeria.
When I was editing.
She was in Triumph.
She was in Triumph.
Editor of the Sunday.
When I was MD of New Nigeria, the editor at that time was Innocent of Baradiki. He was late.
Yes, Innocent, yes.
We had all sorts of crises with him. Eventually, Innocent was removed. So I was able to bring in Bikisu because she had all the credentials. So she was the first woman editor of New Nigeria, and she still stayed back.
Edited New Nigeria Daily.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's good. I knew she was editor of Sunday Triumph.
Triumph.
But she did not
It was from editor
of
Sunday Triumph. Even Triumph, she left. She was removed. She didn't stay long.
Yeah.
She didn't edit it. But even as with Triumph, she was moved back to the Ministry of Information. So it was while she was serving as the staff of Ministry of Information that she came to edit Nigeria.
That was when
we were classmates from ABU. We already in the same department, so we knew each other. So that was when she came to edit
New
Nigeria.
So you all came together to form.
So to start Citizen. I remember on one of my trips to the UK, I even went to the Economist and had a discussion, to see how they functioned, how they, the operations and so on before we started our own Citizen.
Citizen was good.
It was good, but it lasted only 4 years.
Yeah, so what happened?
Cash crunch. As you know very well, newspapers, magazines, you more or less, you're on credit. The cash flow is, you give your vendors this, it's when they sell that they return. And if you don't have a deep pocket
to keep progress,
eventually, I'm sure you know that that's what eventually caught up with even Newswatch.
yeah.
Although they had a very long run, 25 years, that was 27 years. Eventually, because if you send on credits and then you only collect your money, it becomes a problem. As I said,
but that's how it's always been in Nigeria.
Yeah.
They sell to the vendors on credit, you get their money later, and it's never changed.
It's never changed, and of course, eventually it always catches up. That's why it's a miracle. Newspaper like you still around. But I'm sure, I don't know how they are able to survive. I know it's tough.
No,
all the newspapers.
It's not easy for any newspaper.
I mean, once upon a time, a newspaper like the Sunday Times, as you know, 500,000 copies. If you all together now, I don't think all our newspapers print more than maybe about 50,000.
In fact,
really,
what Sunday Times used to produce at that time. So after, you must have been disappointed that you couldn't continue with it.
Of course, it was very sad for me that we couldn't continue. Because
you couldn't find any peak back when you also to
no. And because
to continue to pump into it.
No, because
it was an independent magazine.
Of course, the four of us that I mentioned now co-founded it. Of course, we have some fairly wealthy people as shareholders. We have like somebody like Mallam Mohammed, who was a minister. We had Mallam Haruna, who was my godfather. He was the chairman actually of the company itself. Yeah. But those who had money, of course, they are not for their Christmas. Naturally, they want business. So if I have somebody like Lord Isa, who is also a businessman, they're aiming for the profit. So if they don't see returns, I mean, naturally, it's only a question of time that it catches up with you. So in spite of all our best efforts and so on, and editorially, there was no doubt about it, that we were doing very well. The circulation was fairly there, but caught up with us. So eventually the newspaper folded, and the magazine folded after 4 years. And Lord, everybody went his own way.
So what did you do? Where did you go?
Well, I was kind of semi-consulting. I was writing columns, a syndicated column, and then for about 6 years or so, I did part-time teaching in Kaduna-based University. By that time, I started a department of mass comm.
Okay.
In our years,
there was no mass comm department.
In fact, the only university initially that had a mass comm was Nsukka.
Was it because
before
Unida?
Nsukka first, before Unida.
Okay.
So, but eventually, ABU established, and I taught part-time also in that interest. During that time, that I became the chief press secretary of General Salami as the head of state.
Okay. That was for us, the long stay that he was there.
Yeah.
How was it?
No, he was only there 11 months. It's the shortest military.
Yeah, that's what I said for the long stay that he was there.
Yeah.
Was there, he was the briefest head of state.
Briefest, 11 months.
That's 11 months. And you were there for that 11
Not altogether 11 months, I think for about 8 months. Because
someone was there before you.
No, Atta was the chief press secretary for Abacha. Continued for a while.
Okay, for a while.
Yeah. So I took over from David Atta. I'm sure you know David Atta.
I know David Atta.
Yeah.
I know David Atta.
So I took over from.
Where is David Atta?
He's late.
Oh, God.
He died long ago.
I didn't even know that.
Okay.
So, okay, after the military regime, what happened to you?
No, you mean
after General Abdusalam Abubakar left office and the new government came in, what happened to you? The civilian government came in.
Civilian government, that was Obasanjo.
Yeah.
Of course, I handed over to his late man, to the chief press secretary. What's his name? Doyi Okugwe.
Yeah.
He took over. Of course, I went back into private life, and that's where I was until I was appointed.
Were you teaching again?
No, but after, of course, I left teaching before my appointment
With
with
the general.
So in between, I was just freelancing,
That was
getting
good.
by.
Getting by, that was the one.
Of course, and life went on.
And then disappointment
And
came.
then this appointment came, and I've been in this job now for this is my
What's the
second
longest
tenure.
serving? Are you the longest serving?
Two of us, myself and me, Babuche, because we served under Mahmoud.
Okay. You were
Of course, he
about
too,
the same time.
he too served, got a second tenure, which was historic because no INEC chairman has ever served more than one term before Mahmoud. In fact, a lot of them served
That's
far less than even time because of course
less than
politics,
the
crisis and so on.
election and things.
Yeah.
So how has it been INEC commissioner, national commissioner? Well, it's not like the newsroom.
Of course not. Of course not. It's a totally different together. This one is for public service, you can make policy. INEC has 12 commissioners. The Constitution itself says the members are 13 of them. The chairman.
You have different type of INEC commissioners. Please tell us.
There's no
National
two types.
commissioner. Okay,
Two types. There are members of the commission. The Constitution says there will be 13 members of the commission. The chairman himself and 12 others.
Okay.
Who are chosen, nominated by the president, and the basis is we will have 6 geopolitical zones. So each geopolitical produces two. So that makes the 12 of us. And those 12 will be chairman and members of the commission. 13. So those 12 are called national commissioners.
Okay.
Then for each state has a resident electoral commissioner.
Okay.
Even those ones too are appointed by the president. But they are nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, just like the national commissioners. But whereas the national commissioners are sworn in by the president, the resident electoral commissioners are sworn in by the chairman of the commission.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that is the difference.
Okay.
Of course, the resident electoral commissioners are not members of the commission. It's the members of the commission that make policy for the commission, and they delegate their authority to the resident electoral commissioners. So that when there are elections, the resident for, let's say for the governorships, is the policies that are made by the commission is what they delegate for the
Implement at the
to
state
implement at the states. And if we have issues with them, we can suspend them. The commission itself can suspend them. Like I'm sure you know, we had an issue with the resident electoral commissioner in Adamawa.
Yes, I remember that.
When
He
he
was suspended.
went beyond his brief and declared the result, because that was not, so he was suspended.
So he wasn't supposed to
At
declare.
all, we have returning officers. And the commission again is the one that appoints the returning officers. The coalition and returning officers are appointed
So
by the commission.
how did that one end? He remained suspended.
But eventually, I think he was under trial, he was being prosecuted. But I don't know if where this is the state of affairs now. But he was being prosecuted for doing the wrong
For
thing.
what he did. So somebody else was appointed.
So somebody else, a national commissioner had to go and conclude
That election
for the state, for Adamawa State. We also had a similar thing in Enugu and Sokoto. In all those cases, we suspended the resident electoral commissioners, and some national commissioners were assigned to run for that of take over. For that of Enugu, I remember it was the admin sec, because each state has an admin secretary that works under the resident electoral. He is like the head of the civil service in the state. So he was the one that conducted the election, but supervised, of course, by the national commissioner. As I said, the national commissioners, the two per state, each of them supervises a collection of 3 states. So for the southeast, because there are 5 states in the southeast, Benue was, for our own administrative convenience, is added to those states. So 2 of the national commissioners from the Southeast, one supervises 3 states, then the other one supervises the remaining 2 plus Benue. So any issue that arises in Benue is under the national commissioner supervising
From that particular area.
Yeah, he's in charge.
Okay. So how has it been in the last 9 years?
We've had elections, 2 elections now. Of course, the first general election was 2023. You all know what happened. For me, I would say it's probably the best election this country has conducted.
Say that.
It's a big,
I
can say that again.
2023 election.
2023 election.
That brought in.
That brought in Buhari. That returned Buhari.
That
You know, it's 2015 that brought him in. No, so that brought in not Buhari.
The current
That brought in Asiwaju Tinubu. You know, Buhari was brought in 2015.
Yes.
Then
And
he won in
2019.
2019. So he was in charge when we had the 2023 election. You know, the problem people keep looking at.
You were saying that the 2023 election brought in Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is probably the best election.
It's probably the best election.
The election that many people were condemning.
Not many people. The vocal minority were condemning.
Vocal minority. Okay, it's good to note that.
Yeah.
Vocal minority.
Minority because the social media is completely dominated by these people. But on the ground, just do the arithmetic, simple arithmetic. Who are the major parties? Labour, PDP, APC, and of course, as well as party. The PDP, if PDP had remained one, the problem would have easily beaten as well. They divided, Peter Obi took his votes, Kwankwaso took his own, Atiku took his own. If you add all of them up, you are almost twice
what Asiwaju
got. So clearly, if they were one,
they had.
But not only that, so many other things. An election in which Tinubu will lose Lagos. Doesn't it say something? Somebody who is supposed to be the godfather of Lagos politics, and yet he lost Lagos. And Buhari was the sitting president. He lost in Kaduna. His party lost in Kaduna. His party lost in Kaduna, which is where he was resident. Even though he comes originally from Kaduna, but Kaduna is like his first home because his life has always been there. He lost there, lost in Bauchi, in so many northern states. He lost, his party lost in those ways. So if it had been rigged for Asiwaju, how come Asiwaju was able to do all this? And Buhari was able to do that. How come his own party could lose in all those states? Asiwaju's party, the APC, they lost in all those major states. So we had 8, I think about 8 sitting governors. You know, governors now, they regard the Senate as their retirement venue. 8 of them contested, only 2 managed to win their
elections.
And they were 8
to the Senate.
To the Senate. And all the rest of them they lost. Some of them, in fact, the chairperson of INEC in the Senate, Kabiru Gaya, he was, if we were going to rig election for anybody, he should be one of those we rig it for. The same thing, likewise, the chairperson of the House of Reps Committee on INEC, both of them lost. And there was no pressure they could put on some of us because they felt it was like a humiliation. How could they be chairing the committee on INEC and yet?
So as far as you are concerned, the 2023 election was good.
The problem was that presidential hitch. That hitch, because even the National Assembly,
which hitch?
You know, there was we had started experimenting with uploading on IREF going back to 2022. You know, in Nasarawa, it was a state constituency. We experimented with that, and from there on, every election that we conducted about 8 off-season governorship elections. We conducted senatorial, National Assembly elections. You know, people dying. We have to conduct by-elections. All of them we tested the IREF, that is uploading from the BIVAS, which is a biometric voters accreditation system. We were uploading real time, and the accreditation itself, perfect, almost perfect, 98%, 95%. It was the upload that became problematic, and that was the upload was only in the presidential election for a number of hours, not even for the entire day. We noticed that when the thing started, National Assembly was going on smoothly. Senate, the uploads were going on smoothly. The House of Reps were going on smoothly. Then we noticed for the presidential, it wasn't uploading. So we tried to interrogate this. Then quickly we tried to find out. Of course, the first thing you do is you shut down, because you don't know. Maybe we thought it was maybe some attack from some hacking. So by the time we established that it wasn't hacking, we were able to bring the thing back to normal. But that was about maybe about 4 or 5. I've forgotten. Definitely before the following day. So we resumed, but it was still slower than the National Assembly. The reason was simple. For the presidential, it's one constituency. So every result, every voter that came in will come. You now, for the governorship, for instance, it will go into, from the polling unit, it goes into the ward. From the ward, it goes to the local government. From the local government, it goes into the state. So if now you, as an observer, somebody who is interested to see, when you go on you uploaded IREF, the portal itself, when you click on, you go first for governorship. Then the governorship will ask you which states, if it is Abia, let's say Anambra, for instance. Anambra, then you go to the local government. From the local government, in other words, it's a university. From the local government, you now go into the ward. From the ward, then to give you the
so that comes from the top to the lowest.
To the lowest. The presidential, this is the first presidential election we are testing, we are using this IREF on. But for the governors, we have tested it, we have done it so many times. So apparently, we didn't test it. We didn't look at all the possibilities. So when you vote for the president, from ECA, we call it, that's the result sheet for the polling unit. For the president, if you now want to get to that, you have to go through all these processes before you get to the polling unit. So it was like, let's say, I think the example I will give is like a road, all coming to converge into one bottleneck. Traffic from everywhere. When you get to that bottleneck, traffic will just come to a standstill. So that was what happened in the case of the presidential election. So that means we didn't think through it enough to be able to contemplate that kind of thing. But as soon as we were able to solve it, we resumed the upload. And it's up to now, it's still there. And we've always asked people, because when every party will have a polling agent. Your polling agent will collect the original of that ECAT. And any serious party will have a situation where they are collecting, because the IREF doesn't collect. The IREF will only tell you how the votes went in that particular polling unit. So it is up to you, either as an interested, as an observer, or as a contestant, to now be adding them up. So when they compared the original that their agents took away, were they any different from what eventually were uploaded on the IREF? That is the question that people should answer. And the answer, of course, is that they were not any different. So
there was no manipulation.
There was no manipulation. Because people had already made up their mind. That's why I said vocal minorities. I made up their mind who was going to win the election. But as I just pointed out to you, just simple arithmetic. How many votes did Peter Obi get? Eventually he came third after Atiku. But if they had been together, if he had remained the running mate of Atiku, and if Caucus hadn't also, it's possible they would have won that election.
It's possible. What would you say about the recent election at the area council in Abuja, the FCT?
So, are there issues with the election?
Yes, people think it's
How?
The same manipulation. That's how would the one party carry all the votes, the 5 area councils? That ADC did not even get anything.
You should ask me ADC. What is it? If they have, right now, they don't seem to be, there is the same crisis that they had for PDP, that everybody was going this way. Right now, they don't seem to have a solid, I don't know how to put it.
Cohesion.
Solid cohesion, and when you have that kind of thing, what else do you expect? People went, you can see the turnout, and even their criticism is not so much of the conduct of the election. Even ADC is not criticizing the conduct of the election. What they are criticizing is a low turnout. And whose fault would that be? You can't blame INEC for that.
Why was that such a low turnout? Yes, no one is blaming INEC. You see that, but INEC also could have done some mobilization.
No, but we did. We did.
Was it enough?
We sent SMSs to all the voters to tell them where they are polling
SMS to all voters.
All voters, because in 2022, when we increased the polling units, it was 120,000 roughly before, then it became 170 something. So we had to move voters, of course, to the new polling units that were created. So some people were used to the old polling units, so we had to let them know when they are doing it, to remind them. So even that one was enough. But our EOs, that is the electoral officers, the structure of INEC is, the local governments, each one has an electoral, just like the states have resident electoral commissioners. The local governments have EOs, electoral. We told the EOs of the 6 area councils that they should hold stakeholder meetings with the stakeholders, the major stakeholders, community leaders, market women, the civil society organizations and media, and let them know, educate them about all this. So we did this, and of course our own, the Voter Education and Publicity Department, were out in the radio and so on and so forth. So as much as we could, we did our own deeds. So these people didn't turn out, the parties should be blamed more for this, because they are the ones who won the votes. They have members.
And the stakeholders?
They have members. At least they claim to have millions of members. Can't you persuade even your member to come and vote for you?
So at the state level, you have residence commissioners.
Yeah.
At the local government level,
you have electoral officers.
What do you have at the ward level?
We don't have the wards are all under the electoral officers.
Okay.
We used to have RAOs, that is before, but at the ward level. But even with at the local government level, this running all those structure, it's really, really expensive. So but we have offices, buildings and so on in each local government, in all the 774 local governments. So obviously,
the ones that were built in the days of General Babangida?
No.
There were 774 local governments at that time. These buildings were put up for each of those two.
No, those. But Did we have 74 local governments at that time?
These buildings were put up, two in each.
That is for the two parties.
The two parties are the SDP and NRC at that time. So you still have the same 774.
No, this was we still have the 774. And each local government, there were some that because we didn't have buildings for, they were operating from local government headquarters. But, it became problematic. So we had to find a way, so we had to get them out of those, so that some of them, they are renting apartments. But virtually, I think it's only about 500 or so out of the 774 that are in this situation. But even the House of Reps, the National Assembly, they gave us matching orders that we must, even if we needed to bring a budget so that, we don't operate from local government headquarters anymore.
So you were satisfied with the last Indian Council election?
I'm satisfied with the last election.
How do you feel about the low voter turnout?
The low voter turnout is something to worry about. Just like, of course, the INEC is worried about it. Just like we are worried about vote buying and so on. But we did the best. We did our best for low voter turnout. INEC will have a share of the blame, but the greatest culprits are the politicians themselves, because they are the ones who are supposed to be out there campaigning. I found it ironical that Atiku Abubakar, who is the ANC, the only thing they were complaining about is that the vote. That was what they were criticizing. They didn't criticize the management of the election itself. And I'm sure by and large, it was fairly peaceful. We had incidences, one or two, because I happen to be the National Commissioner in charge of Abuja. As I told you, each commissioner supervises 3 states. So in addition to the 3 states that I supervised, Kaduna, Nasarawa, and Plateau, I also supervised Abuja because it's North Central.
Oh, you do? Okay.
We had incidences because, of course, we were monitoring. In one in Kuje and in Wadi. Other than those,
some will say there are no incidences because people were not interested. They didn't come out anyway. If there was no large number, why would there happen?
But incidences will happen regardless of turnout. Because it's like, you can mobilize talks whether people can come out or not to go and cause confusion. And then as I said, one or two, there was one in just 1 or 2 of the 5, 6 area council. Otherwise, everything went smoothly. As I told you, those criticizing the election are not criticizing the conduct of the election. What they are criticizing is this low voter turnout.
Yeah, but this low voter turnout, doesn't it have effect on democracy?
Of course it will. If what it means is that the public does not engage. But who are supposed to mobilize people to get engaged? If I want,
INEC too as well.
INEC is supposed to conduct it, so it's more responsible more for civic education. You tell people how to vote. But it's not that I want to tell people who to vote for.
No,
it is the politicians who should go out there and tell, look, come out and vote for me.
But in telling them how to vote, you also encourage them to come out and vote.
No, we do. That's why I said we also have
not who to vote for, but at least to come out and exercise.
And we do that. We do that. That's why we engage with all the stakeholders, especially civil society organizations, media, and so on and so forth. But I think that also even the civil society organizations and the media too, they have their own share of the blame. For me, they are focused on INEC is okay, but they should focus more even on the parties themselves. How many times do you read stories about how parties conducted their primaries? They don't focus, and that is why it is called primary election. They are the ones that give us throw of the candidates that we now conduct election. And there isn't much internal democracy amongst the parties. That is the main problem. That internal democracy, they have their laws, they have their constitutions. Of all right now we have, I think, about 19 political parties. Almost all of them, hardly any one of them has changed their leadership since 1999. The ones who registered, because there are always loopholes that you can exploit. And they exploit those loopholes and continue being the executive. They go to court. Once they can exploit those, the court says, you know, labor, for instance, the kind of prices they've had, with the Abure, with the Ninadi, and so on and so forth. And it has gone on. At one time, we recognize Abure because the court says that we cannot disobey the court. So the parties themselves, they are the main culprits.
Some countries have a benchmark as to the percentage of turnout of voters.
We don't.
Constitution doesn't have that.
So even 1% people can vote. Anybody can vote.
1% people can vote.
Can vote.
And that will still be accepted as an election.
Of course, it is an election because there is no threshold.
There's no threshold.
There's no threshold.
But what can we do?
So I'm not too sure even the threshold would help. Because one or two countries I understand, like maybe Australia, but most countries, voting is voluntary. You should feel free to come out and vote or not to. But if we don't, that means even the society itself has a problem. Because it means we don't engage, we don't give back to our people enough for them to feel, they own the government, they own the society, they are part of the society. So it's a very tough one. I don't know the solution to it.
Nobody seems to know the solution now.
The solution is at the same time simple. And the simple is that the government is if the government starts performing, people will now, I know the government will provide for my education, it will provide for my housing, my health, and so on and so forth. Obviously, I will want to go out and vote. But regardless of who wins the election, the party seems to be the same. At the end of the day, none of them
is. You cannot distinguish between one party manifesto to the other, so you don't think people are encouraged.
People are not encouraged to come
exercise the voting right. Mallam Mohammed Haruna, I am happy to have had this conversation with you. I see you seem to also have enjoyed being an INEC National Commissioner, which is fine, being an INEC, but the news too must have done something different for you.
Of course, even when I leave INEC, which I will, in the next 1 year, because my tenure is moving, I still intend to
be part of the newsroom in some form.
In some one form or the other. Even if it is just writing or putting together all the columns, and I've been writing
columns. Which is probably what I'm doing now. It's just part of it's in the blood.
I've been writing columns since 78.
Wow.
So even if just to collect those words together, but there are so many things that one can do that it relates to the media. So that's what I
media is part of you.
So it's that's my life.
Thank you so very much
for
doing this reflection for us and telling us how it is. Yes, I was going to ask you what you think the practices now compare with what it was in the past. When we were doing photography, there were no.
Of course, the technology has changed everything. Once upon a time, in those days when we were in university, it's longhand. No telephones, no nothing.
So no internet, no emails.
Nothing. So it should be much easier.
But we survived. Even when we were planning page with rulers, when we had to crop up pictures, it was well done.
Yeah. So things have changed.
As technology,
it should be technology
has made it better.
It has made it better, but at the same time, I don't know how to put it, because there's the kind of rigor that we used to see, that we used to insist on, it's not there anymore. Yeah, all the kind of stories you see, especially in online,
nobody live doing background,
make sure that they are factual. Now anybody with even handset, not just
an editor,
becomes a news break. So the future, of course, for the print media is bleak. As you know, it's virtually it's the social media now that is the thing.
Bleak for the news media.
Yeah, for the print media.
Print media.
Yeah, but now there is a convergence. Print, radio, TV, and so on and so forth. But Something is that is, when you can create, especially with the AI now, something which is false and it looks like it's the truth. So I don't know. I'm worried.
Yeah, everybody is worried. But we survive, we'll be okay.
Yeah.